Welcome. If you are preparing for an Agile coaching interview and looking for a way to sharpen your thinking, clarify your responses, and build confidence for real world scenarios, you're in the right place. This session is designed to help you approach Agile coaching interviews with clarity and strategy. We are going to walk through the kinds of questions you're mostly likely to encounter, the ones that dig beneath certifications and frameworks to test your mindset, experience, and coaching approach. For each topic, we'll talk about how to approach situational questions, what the interviewer is really trying to understand, and how to structure your answers so they reflect your leadership style and practical experience. You'll gain insights into the topics that really matter in interviews for Agile coaching roles, including how you apply Agile values, lead transformation efforts, navigate organizational resistance, and coach teams and leaders through change. Here's what we'll be covering: Agile principles and values, Scrum framework, Kanban and Lean, scaling Agile frameworks, facilitation skills, coaching and mentoring techniques, building high performing teams, Agile transformation, Agile metrics and reporting, leadership coaching and organizational agility, dealing with resistance and change management, continuous improvement and retrospectives, ethics in Agile coaching, psychological safety and trust, conflict resolution, Agile tools and techniques. Remember, that's rarely a single correct answer to these questions. The response will be we discuss are based on real experience, but more importantly, they're designed to help you understand the thinking behind the answer so you can build and adapt your own authentic response during interviews. Let's get started. Agile principles and values. This is often the first area Agile coaching interviewers explore because it reveals how deeply you embody Agile, not just apply frameworks. They're assessing whether you coach from a place of values and mindset or simply promote process compliance. Common questions include: how do you coach a team that follows Agile rituals but lack the mindset? Tell us about a time when Agile values conflicted with organizational priorities. What did you do? How do you help leaders understand the importance of Agile principles? Start by grounding your response in the Agile Manifesto and 12 principles, but emphasize how you live and apply them rather than recite them. You might say, when I coach, I anchor everything in Agile values, whether it's dealing with resistance, improving delivery, or coaching leadership. I keep coming back to what matters: transparency, collaboration, customer focus, and adaptability. Demonstrate how you help teams and leaders shift their focus from tools and checklists to mindsets. For example, they might say, we are agile, we do stand up and sprint, but still operate in a command and control culture. You guide them to inspect interactions, decision makings, and feedback loops instead. Bring in real world tensions point, such as prioritizing working software over extensive documentation when compliance pressure is high, choosing to adapt plans mid-sprint when valuable change emerges, empowering teams to self-organize even when leadership is used to top-down control. Frame these not as idealistic leaps, but as intentional coaching journeys. You meet people where they are and guide gradual shifts towards value-driven behavior. You could share a story where you used Agile principles to influence a difficult stakeholder, for instance, encouraging early delivery and feedback rather than waiting for a full release. Or maybe you helped the team move from blaming individuals to reflecting on the system, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Also, highlight how you model these principles yourself. You show transparency in your coaching, respond to change with grace, and create a safe environment when teams can grow. Avoid sounding rigid or dogmatic. Interviewers want to see that you promote the spirit of Agile, especially in complex environments where values are often tested. Wrap up by reinforcing that your coaching is always grounded in principle driven agility, not just ceremony, not just speed, but real, meaningful improvement based on shared values. Scrum Framework. In Agile coaching interviews, questions around Scrum aren't just about your understanding of the framework. They're meant to assess how effectively you coach individuals, teams, and leadership to live Scrum in messy, real world environments. The interviewer is trying to understand whether you can unlock Scrum's potential beyond just facilitating events or checking boxes. Common questions include: how do you coach a team that is doing Scrum mechanically but not delivering value? What do you do when the roles in Scrum are misunderstood or blended? Have you helped an organization evolve its Scrum practices? How? Start by clarifying that Scrum is an empirical framework designed to deliver value through short feedback loops. Your role as an agile coach is to help people understand why the events, roles, and artifacts matter and how to use them as tools for collaboration, transparency, and adaptation. You might say, when coaching Scrum, I don't focus on whether people follow every rule. I focus on whether they're getting the outcome Scrum is meant to create: alignment, focus, fast feedback, and shared ownership. Discuss how you evaluate a team's current use of Scrum. Are stand up just status updates? Are retrospectives rushed or skipped? Is the product owner truly owning value decisions? Your job is to guide them toward deeper engagement with Scrum principles, not just surface level practice. Explain how you help teams or organizations move beyond the basics. For example, maybe you help the team realize they were overcommitting by walking them through historical velocity, or you work with a product owner to create a more transparent product backlog with clear prioritization. Address common dysfunctions like a Scrum Master acting as a coordinator rather than a coach, a PO who defers all decisions to stakeholders, developers who hesitate to inspect or speak up in events, leaders trying to assign work instead of supporting autonomy. Then describe how you help the team realign. You might use shadowing and feedback, role alignment workshops, system modeling, or storytelling techniques to help people rediscover what Scrum is truly meant for. You also should include how you work with leadership and support teams to create the right conditions for Scrum to thrive, such as shifting finding models, reducing external interruptions, or clarifying team boundaries. Avoid listing events or quoting the Scrum guide. Instead, demonstrate that you coach toward outcomes, inspecting not just what the team does, but how they think, collaborate, and deliver. Interviewers are looking for someone who understands Scrum deeply and who can help others unlock its power in dynamic, complex systems where simple rules alone don't get results. Kanban and Lean. Agile coaching interviews often explore Kanban and Lean to understand your flexibility with frameworks and your deep of thinking around flow, value delivery, and system optimization. Interviewers want to see if you can guide teams and organizations beyond Scrum, especially in contexts where interactive planning doesn't fit. Common interview questions include: how do you introduce Kanban to a team that's new to it? How do you apply lean principles in agile transformation? When would you recommend Kanban over Scrum? Start by clarifying that Kanban is not just a visual board, it's a method for improving flow by making work visible, limiting VIP, and continuously improving based on data. It's highly adaptable and especially effective in teams dealing with unpredictable, service oriented, or operational work. You might say, when coaching Kanban, I focus on visualizing the system as it really works and how we wish it to work. We make policies explicit, limit VIP, and start inspecting flow metrics like cycle time and throughput. Explain that you don't just introduce Kanban as a quick alternative to Scrum. You assess team needs first. If the team works with unplanned, interrupt driven tasks like infrastructure, support, or DevOps, Kanban provides more flexibility. If predictability and experimentation are priorities, Scrum might be more effective. When applying lean thinking, demonstrate how you coach toward identifying and removing waste, shortening feedback loops, and delivering value with less friction. You might use techniques like value stream mapping to help teams and leadership see where time is lost and head-offs happens. Talk about how you use flow metrics, such as cumulative flow diagrams, work item age, or service level expectations, to guide the team toward improved predictability and performance. But you also stress that metrics are not just for judgment, they're there for learning and adaptation. A strong example: I work with a support team overwhelmed by requests. We visualized their backlog, added classes of services, introduced a VIP limit, and soon saw miserable drop in lead time. More importantly, the team felt in control. Avoid presenting Kanban as a simplified or less serious agile approach. The interviewer is looking for someone who understands the system thinking behind Lean and Kanban and can coach others to embrace flow based agility, even in traditionally project driven environments. Also, mention how Kanban can act as a gentle entry point for change, especially in organizations not ready for full Scrum. You guide gradual improvement, working with what exists instead of enforcing wholesale transformation. Wrap up by emphasizing that your coaching approach flexes based on context. Whether it's Scrum, Kanban, or a hybrid approach, you always coach with a clear eye on value, flow, and continuous learning. Scaling Agile frameworks. When Agile coaching interviews touch on scaling, they're not just asking if you know SAP, LeSS, or Nexus. They want to see whether you understand the principles of scaling, the challenges of cross team coordination, and how to guide organizations to scale sustainable without killing agility. Common questions include: what scaling frameworks have you worked with, and what challenges did you face? How do you ensure alignment across multiple agile teams? What would you do if leadership wants to scale quickly but teams aren't ready? Begin by acknowledging that scaling agile is not about rolling out a framework. It's about extending agility across multiple teams while preserving team level autonomy, fast feedback, and value focus. You coach people to ask why they're scaling before deciding how. You might say, I don't lead with a framework. I first help the organization understand what problems they're trying to solve: misalignment, delivery delays, too much VIP, and then we explore that lightweight structures could help. Describe your experience with frameworks like SAP, LeSS, Nexus, or Spotify inspired models, but don't oversell them. Instead, share how you've helped organizations adapt frameworks to suit their culture, maturity, and goals. For example, did you help a group of Scrum teams align on a shared goals through joint planning or shared sprint reviews? Did you introduce a simple coordination layer before moving to a formal scaling model? Did you help leadership understand that governance and autonomy can coexist? A key part of scaling is coaching leadership and middle management. Explain how you work with team to shift from controlling teams to enabling alignment through vision, roadmaps, and outcome-based planning. Touch on common challenges. Framework overload. People focus on roles, events, and miss the value. Dependencies slowing delivery. Uneven maturity across teams. Resistance from support functions, PMO, finance, HR. You might say, I helped the organization evolve its quarterly planning process. We moved from rigid project milestones to cross team PI objectives with room for adaptation. Over time, trust improved and teams started coordinating proactively. Avoid implying that scaling is one size fits all solution. Instead, demonstrate that you understand when scaling is appropriate, how to preserve agility at scale, and how to guide organizations to evolve with context, not blindly copy. Wrap up by enforcing your approach. Start with clarity of purpose, support the teams that deliver value, and help build adaptive structures, not bureaucracies dress up as agile. Facilitation skills. Facilitation is a core competence for agile coaches. In interviews, this topic is often used to evaluate how well you guide conversations, resolve tensions, drive decisions, and create inclusive, outcome oriented collaboration, especially in complex or high stakes settings. Common questions include: how do you handle dominant voices or silence in a retrospective? What's your approach to facilitating leadership workshops or team events? Can you share a time when your facilitation changed the outcome of a meeting? Start by emphasizing that effective facilitation isn't about running a meeting. It's about creating the right conditions for participation, insight, and progress. As a coach, your role is to help groups think better together. You might say, I design every session with a purpose, flow, and flexibility. Whether it's a team or retro or a leadership offsite, I aim to balance structure with emergence, giving people the space to speak, think, and decide. Break down how you prepare. Do you align with the meeting sponsor beforehand, set clear objectives, Plan for breakout activities, energy shifts, or challenging dynamics. Interviewers want to know you are intentional, not just reactive. Then move into techniques you use, such as liberating structures of visual facilitation tools, using time boxes, parking lots, and check ins to keep focus, creating psychological safety through openers, norms, and anonymous inputs, ensuring every voice is heard using techniques like 1, 2, 4, all or dot voting. Share a concrete story. Maybe you facilitated a continuous retro where two senior developers were in conflict and you use silent brainstorming to surface ideas without escalation. Or you ran a product vision workshop where stakeholder tension was diffused through structured prioritization and visual canvases. Don't forget the remote context. Describe how you adapt facilitation for virtual spaces. What tools do you use, like Miro, Mural, Jamboard? How do you keep engagement in long sessions? Address tricky situations like resistance from participants, leadership dominating a workshop, group indecision, lack of psychological safety. Explain how you navigate these by sensing energy shifts, adjusting formats on the fly, or surfacing underlying issues gently and skillfully. Avoid presenting facilitation as event choreography. Interviewers want to see that you understand the deeper goal, unlocking collective intelligence, and that you can hold space for tension, reflection, and decisions, especially when things don't go as planned. Wrap up by reinforcing that facilitation isn't a sideline skill. It's a core part of your coaching presence and a major level for transformation above team and leadership levels. Coaching and mentoring techniques. This topic is at the heart of agile coaching. In interviews, it's used to explore how you apply coaching versus mentoring, how you adapt your approach to the context, and whether you're able to build capability, not dependency, in individuals and teams. Common interview questions include: how do you balance coaching and mentoring in your work? Can you give an example of coaching a team versus mentoring an individual? What techniques do you use to help people grow without giving them all the answers? Begin by clarifying the distinctions. Coaching is about asking powerful questions, enabling discovery, and helping people find their own answers. Mentoring is more directive, offering guidance based on experience, especially when someone is new to Agile or facing unfamiliar territory. You might say, I choose whether to coach or mentor based on the person's readiness and context. I might mentor a new Scrum Master on how to structure a retrospective, but coach them on how to handle team conflict. Interviewers want to hear that you assess the level of awareness, confidence, and ownership before deciding how to engage. For example, with senior leaders, you may mostly coach, drawing out insights through questions. With new team members, you might alternate between modeling and reflection. Describe the techniques you use, such as grow model or clean language in coaching conversations, active listening and observation, scaling questions on a scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you? Role plays and feedback loops, shadowing, then debriefing together. Share real examples. Maybe you coach a product owner who struggles with stakeholder pressure. Instead of giving advice, you ask them what outcomes they wanted, how they might say no respectfully, and what options they hadn't considered. Or you mentored a junior Scrum Master by walking through facilitation patterns and anti patterns, then gradually stepped back. Also, highlight how you create psychological safety and trust, the foundation for any coaching relationship. You show up with presence, respect on confidentiality, and build partnerships instead of hierarchies. Interviewers will appreciate if you also mention knowing your limits, referring someone to a professional coach or therapist when appropriate, or stepping back when mentoring becomes dependency. Avoid sounding overly directive or passive. Show that you bring both structure and adaptability, and that your goal is always to build the client's self awareness, capability, and ownership. Wrap up by reinforcing that your approach is not to solve people's problems for them, is to empower them to solve their own using the right balance of coaching, mentoring, and challenge. Building high performing teams. This topic frequently comes up in agile coaching interviews because it's a core outcome of your work. Interviewers want to know if you can recognize team development stages, foster autonomy and ownership, and intervene effectively to elevate team performance beyond just delivery speed. Common questions include: how do you help a team become self organizing and high performing? What do you do when a team is stuck in conflict or low trust? Can you share a time when you helped transform a struggling team? Begin by referencing models you use, like Tuckman stages, forming, storming, norming, performing, but make it clear you focus on practical actions, not just theory. High performance isn't just about outcomes, it's about ownership, psychological safety, collaboration, and continuous learning. You might say, I help teams build a shared sense of purpose, create clarity around roles and norms, and reflect regularly to improve how they work together. High performance starts with trust, not just skills. Talk about how you start with team assessment, looking at dynamics, delivery patterns, engagement levels, and impediments. Then describe how you use facilitation, coaching, and modeling to guide them forward. For example, if there's low ownership, you might introduce team charters or peer accountability agreements. Include strategies like enabling team led decision making, coaching on conflict resolution and feedback, establishing shared working agreements and norms, improving visibility and shared metrics, celebrating small wins and progress. A strong story could be about a team where key members were disengaged and silos had formed. You facilitated open conversations, used retrospectives to surface frustration, helped the team redesign their workflow, and over time, ownership and morale improved significantly. Also, touch on cross functional collaboration. Do you help the team build empathy across roles, create alignment with the product owner, break down delivery bottlenecks between dev and QA, avoid saying that high performing teams just happen or come from hiring great people. Show that you intentionally create the conditions for high performance, psychological safety, shared goals, honest reflection, and space for growth. You might close with: my focus isn't to push a team toward high performance, it's to create an environment where they can discover what that means for them and take ownership of their journey. Agile transformation. In agile coaching interviews, this is one of the most critical and complex topics. Interviewers use it to assess your ability to guide change at the organizational level, beyond teams and frameworks. They want to know if you can influence culture, work with resistance, and help organizations shift mindset, not just structure. Common questions include: what's your approach to leading an agile transformation? How do you deal with resistance from leadership or middle management? What does success look like in an agile transformation? Start by emphasizing that agile transformation is a cultural and behavioral shift, not just a rollout of practices. You might say, I approach transformation as a journey of mindset, leadership, and system thinking, not at one time agile implementation. Describe how you start by understanding the current system through assessment, interviews, and observing how work actually flows. You look for signs of silhouette thinking, top down control, slow decision making, and misaligned incentives. Then explain your approach, typically a phased, context aware strategy that combines education, piloting, leadership engagement, and system level feedback. Include real tactics such as running leadership workshops on agile principles and servant leadership, partnering with HR or finance to align policies and governance, starting small with one or two pilot teams and scaling based on learning, creating internal coaching capability to sustain the change, using storytelling and visual tools to align on a transformation vision. Share a story where transformation wasn't smooth. Maybe a leadership team that wanted agile delivery but resisted transparency, or a department that adopted Scrum but ignored the need for empowered teams. Show how you address this through facilitation, feedback loops, and persistent coaching. Make it clear you're comfortable navigating resistance and ambiguity. You expect people to feel threatened or confused, and you use empathy, education, and steady influence to move things forward rather than pushing for compliance. Avoid framing transformation as a checklist of practices like sprints, Kanban, Jira, etc. Instead, emphasize how you build a continuous change capability where people at all levels understand why change is happening, feel ownership, and know how to inspect and adapt. You might close with, for me, transformation success means people work with more clarity, purpose, and trust, and the organization continuously learns how to deliver value better. Agile becomes how they think, not what they follow. Agile metrics and reporting. This topic helps interviewers understand whether you use metrics as a tool for learning and improvement, not control or punishment. As an Agile coach, your role is to help teams, leaders, and stakeholders use data transparently and meaningfully, aligned with Agile principles. Common questions include: what metrics do you recommend for Agile teams? How do you coach leadership to interpret Agile metrics? What do you do when metrics are being misused? Start by clarifying your approach. I coach teams and leaders to treat metrics as signals, not targets. Metrics should spark conversation and uncover system constraints, not create pressure to game the numbers. Discuss team level metrics such as cycle time, lead time, throughput, work in progress, WIP, cumulative flow diagrams, CFDs, defect rates or escape defects, velocity with caution. Explain how you guide teams to use these to identify delays, bottlenecks, or overcommitment and improve their flow, predictability, or quality. But you also stress that metrics must come with context and the team own how they're used. Then shift to organizational or leadership level metrics such as time to market, customer satisfaction, release frequency, employee engagement or team health, cost of delay, forecasting confidence. You might say, I help leadership focus on outcomes and value delivery, not story points or sprint burndown. I encourage alignment on what good looks like and how metrics can reflect it without driving the wrong behaviors. Share an example where metrics were being misused. Maybe a team was pressured to increase velocity, and how you coach leadership to refocus on customer value or sweet sustainable delivery instead. You can also talk about using qualitative insights like retrospective themes or stakeholder feedback alongside quantitative data, helping teams see the full picture and avoid metric obsessions. Mention tools if relevant, like Jira Dashboard, Flow Analytics, or Value Stream Maps, but emphasize that conversation and insight matter more than charts. Avoid giving a long list of metrics. Instead, demonstrate your ability to choose, coach, and involve metrics based on what the team or organization needs, always grounded in transparency, learning, and trust. Wrap up with: I don't define success but what's measured. I define it by what's improved. Metrics support Agile when they promote curiosity, reflection, and better decisions, not when they drive fear or manipulation. Leadership coaching and organizational agility. This is a key topic for agile coaching interviews, especially for senior roles. Interviewers want to know whether you can coach leaders, not just teams, and whether you can help organizations shift from hierarchical control to adaptive leadership and value-driven agility. Common questions include: how do you coach leaders who want agile results without changing their mindset? What do you do when leadership behavior contradicts agile principles? Can you share a time when you influence organizational agility through leadership coaching? Start by explaining your view of leadership in an agile context. You might say, I help leaders move from command and control to enabling and empowering. That shift starts with mindset, understanding that agility isn't about speed, it's about adaptability, learning, and trust. Then describe how you build relationships with leaders. not by preaching agile, but by asking questions, understanding their challenges, and showing how agility aligns with their goals. You don't just coach about agile, you coach in the context of real business needs. Share specific coaching approaches, such as using systemic coaching or RSC models for leadership teams, one-on-one coaching with powerful questions and reflections, leadership workshops focused on outcome, agility, and cultural blockers, surfacing organizational impediments through safe, data-informed feedback, helping leaders experiment with new ways of leading, example delegation, decentralization. Also, address the challenge of misalignment between agile values and leadership behavior. For example, leaders who say they want self organizing teams but override decisions. Show how you bring awareness gently but firmly, perhaps through storytelling, mirror techniques, or mapping leadership behavior to team impact. Explain how you measure progress, not in agile terms, but in organizational agility indicators, faster decision cycles, fewer dependencies, clearer goals, more empowered teams, and learning from failure. Include a story where you coaching helped shift a leadership team's behavior, such as reducing status reporting, adopting OKRs, or supporting role clarity. Maybe they began to align on outcomes instead of micromanaging deliverables. Avoid sounding overly theoretical. Interviewers want to know you've had real conversations with leaders where influence, empathy, and business alignment matter more than frameworks. You might close with, when leaders shift how they think and act, the entire system responds. That's where the true agility begins, not with the teams, but with leadership's willingness to learn, listen, and adapt. Dealing with resistance and change management. Agile coaches are change agents, and interviewers want to know if you can guide individuals and organizations through resistance, fear, and uncertainty without forcing compliance. This topic explores your understanding of how people experience change and your skill in creating movement with empathy and influence. Common interview questions include: how do you deal with teams or individuals resisting agile? Tell us about a time when you helped someone shift their mindset. What's your approach to managing change across an organization? Begin by acknowledging that resistance is natural and expected, and often a sign that people care about quality, control, or outcomes. You might say, I don't try to eliminate resistance, I work to understand it. Resistance is often unspoken fear, uncertainty, or past disappointment. My job is to create safety, dialogue, and clarity. Then describe your approach to navigating resistance, such as actively listening to concerns rather than defining agile, identifying the real fear, loss of control, clarity, or competence, framing change in terms of outcome they care about, better collaboration, less rework, using pilot teams and small wins to reduce fear of failure, co-creating change instead of imposing it. You can explain that you combine change models like Kotter's 8-step process, ADKAR, or Satter's change curve with practical facilitation and coaching, but you focus less on the model, more on human behavior and emotional safety. Give an example. Maybe a middle manager felt threatened by team autonomy. Instead of pushing back, you invited them into conversations, help redefine their role as an enabler, and over time build trust. Or maybe you work with a team that resisted Scrum events and you introduced lightweight versions that gradually gained buy in. Touch on organizational resistance too. Do you help HR, finance, or compliance team adapt without losing control? Do you create cross-functional workshops to expose dependencies and foster empathy? Make it clear you don't escalate or enforce change. You uncover the friction, build trust, and help people discover why change matters for them. You might add, one of my core beliefs is that change happens at the speed of trust. I don't need people to agree right away. I need them to feel heard and safe enough to explore what's possible. Avoid sounding dismissive or resistance or overly soft. Show that you understand the emotional reality of change and that you guide people with patience, clarity, and influence, not pressure. Wrap up by reinforcing that resistance isn't a blocker, it's part of the process, and your job is to walk beside people as they move through it. Continuous improvement and retrospectives. This topic helps interviewers assess how effectively you foster a culture of learning and adaptation. It's not just about running good retrospectives, it's about helping teams and organizations build the habit of inspecting and improving, even when it's uncomfortable or unclear. Common interview questions include: how do you help teams take retrospectives seriously and act on them? What techniques do you use to drive continuous improvement? Can you give an example of a time when a team resisted change after a retro? Start by reinforcing your philosophy. For me, retrospectives are not about fixing people or pointing fingers. They're about building awareness, ownership, and momentum, helping teams see where they are, where they want to go, and how to get there together. When describe how you create a safe, focused, and engaging space for retros, you adjust your approach depending on the team's maturity, energy, or situation, using structured techniques like start, stop, continue, for a less, liked, learned, lacked, longed for, sailboat or timeline retros, open-ended conversation formats, rotating facilitation or anonymous input for psychological safety. Emphasize that retrospection doesn't end with the session. You help the team prioritize action items, assign ownership, track follow through, reflect in the next retro, creating a loop of accountability and growth. You might say, a retro is successful not when it feels good, but when something meaningful changes as a result. Even small shifts can reinforce the habit of improvement. Discuss how you handle common dysfunctions, teams repeating the same issues, leadership ignoring feedback, action items not follow up, retros being skipped under pressure. Share a real story, perhaps a team that kept surfacing blame in retros. You coach them toward more systemic thinking by visualizing workflow and data. Or maybe a retro led to a bold experiment like dropping daily stand-ups for a week, which unlocked better communication. Extend the topic to continuous improvement beyond retros. Do you encourage metrics-driven reflection, customer feedback loops, or improvement experiments between sprints? Do you help leadership teams run retrospectives on strategy, not just delivery? Avoid reducing retros to a Scrum ritual. Instead, show that you embed continuous learning as a culture muscle, something teams own, enjoy, and evolve over time. You could close with: agility lives or dies by the team's ability to learn. My goal is to help retros move from routine to reflection, and for continuous improvement to become how the team thinks, not just what they schedule. Ethics in Agile coaching. In Agile coaching interviews, ethics may not always be directly asked about, but strong candidates bring it up themselves or demonstrate it through the way they describe their decisions and boundaries. Interviewers want to know if you operate with integrity, confidentiality, and a clear sense of responsibility, especially in high stakes or politically sensitive environment. Common questions include: what do you do when you're asked to coach in an area that feels misaligned with Agile values? How do you maintain confidentiality and trust while working with multiple levels of stakeholders? Can you give an example of an ethical dilemma you faced as a coach? Start by stating your stance. As a coach, I hold ethical responsibility not only to the client but to the system I'm working in. That means honoring confidentiality, respecting boundaries, and sometimes speaking truth to power, even when it's uncomfortable. Discuss how you handle confidentiality, especially when coaching individuals while also working with leadership. You make it clear that one-on-one coaching conversations are private unless the person explicitly consents to share, and you never use what you learn to manipulate or influence decisions behind their back. Then talk about integrity in guidance. If you're asked to rubber stamp a transformation that isn't genuine or coach a team where leaders aren't supporting change, you voice your concerns respectfully. You don't play along to keep the contract. You stay centered on values and outcomes. Share examples such as refusing to push a team to deliver faster when quality or morale would suffer, calling out agile theater to leadership when rituals are in place but learning and value aren't, choosing not to coach an individual because the relationship lacked trust or crossed ethical lines. You might add, Ethics also shows up in how I handle power. I don't manipulate, coerce, or hide behind agile jargon. I aim to serve the system, not to control it, and that requires clarity, humility, and sometimes saying no. Mention that you align with ethical codes like the LC Agile Coaching Code of Ethics or draw from professional coaching standards such as those from ISF or MMACC, depending on your training. But you don't just follow rules, you model ethical behavior in how you show up every day. Avoid sounding defensive or overly self righteous. Show that you faced gray areas and wrestled with trade offs, and that your ethical compass is grounded in transparency, respect, and service. Wrap up with ethical coaching isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest, responsible, and self aware. I see trust as my most valuable asset, and I protect it through every conversation, decision, and commitment I make. Psychological safety and trust. This is one of the most crucial yet often underestimated areas in agile coaching interviews. Interviewers want to see if you understand that agility doesn't thrive without safety and whether you can help teams and leaders create an environment where people can speak up, challenge ideas, admit mistakes, and grow. Common questions include: how do you build trust within a new team or organization? What do you do when people hesitate to speak openly in retros or planning sessions? How do you help create psychological safety at scale? Start by grounding your approach in the core idea that psychological safety is a prerequisite for learning, collaboration, and innovation, and that your presence and actions as a coach significantly influence it. You might say, when people don't feel safe, they disengage or play it safe. I focus on building trust through consistency, empathy, and creating space for all voices, especially the quiet ones. Describe the early signals you look for when joining a team: who speaks and who doesn't, whether people interrupt or listen, how conflict is handled, avoided, escalated, or explored, whether mistakes are discussed openly or quietly hidden. Then explain how you act. You model vulnerability yourself, admitting when you don't know something, asking for feedback, or pausing when you sense tensions. You create inclusive facilitation formats, use anonymous inputs when needed, and coach team members on giving them and receiving feedback respectfully. If relevant, mention tools or techniques you've used, such as the Team Trust Canvas, Amy at Bunson Safety Assessment Questions, the check-in round at the start of meetings, silent brainstorming to equalize participation, normalizing dissent and respectful disagreement. Also, talk about coaching leaders to create safety. For example, helping them shift from performance pressure to curiosity, or challenging them when their actions, like public blame or micromanagement, undermine trust. Share a real example, maybe a team that avoided hard conversations, and how you help them explore those topics gently until it becomes normalized. Or a team that feared leadership reactions, and how you facilitated a shared retrospective with both sides that unlocked openness. Make it clear that psychological safety is not about making people comfortable, it's about making it safe to be real, candid, and experimental, even when the stakes are high. Avoid vague generalizing like trust takes time. Show that you build trust intentionally and actively through your presence, your structure, and your courage. Wrap up with: Agile thrives in environments where people feel safe to show up fully, challenge ideas, and take risks. I see psychological safety as the foundation, not the soft stuff, but the system stuff that enables everything else to work. Conflict resolution. Agile coaches are often brought into teams and organizations to help navigate and resolve conflict, not to avoid it. Interviewers want to know if you can handle difficult dynamics with neutrality, empathy, and effectiveness, whether it's between team members, across department, or even within leadership. Common questions include: how do you approach conflict between two strong-willed team members? What do you do when a product owner and a scrum master aren't aligned? Can you share an example of a time you helped resolve a team conflict? Begin by framing your belief that conflict is not a problem, it's a signal. You might say, healthy conflict is essential to growth. I help teams shift from avoiding or escalating conflict to working through it constructively with curiosity, respect, and shared ownership. Then describe how you diagnose and prepare. You observe patterns of avoidance, dominance, silence, or blame. You look at the system factors, unclear roles, hidden tensions, or pressures from leadership, not just interpersonal friction. Explain your techniques such as one-on-one coaching to understand perspectives, facilitating structured conversations, example 1, 2, 4, all, empathy mapping, re-establishing shared goals or working agreements, reflecting unspoken dynamics back to the group in a neutral tone, coaching individuals on giving, receiving feedback without triggering defensiveness. You might say, I don't rush to resolve the tension. I create space where people can hear each other, often for the first time, and where the goal isn't to agree but to understand. Share a real story. Maybe a dev and tester were in constant friction. You coach each separately, then facilitated a conversation where they clarified expectations and frustrations. Or maybe leadership and delivery teams had trust issues, and you used retrospective data to surface concerns without blame. Address how you handle conflict between hierarchies, like when middle managers feel sidelined or team autonomy threatens existing power structures. You focus on surfacing needs, reframing tensions as shared challenges, and coaching leaders to engage constructively. Avoid sounding like you fix people. Instead, show that you build capacity for conflict resolution within the system, helping teams develop the confidence and tools to handle it themselves over time. You might close with, I see conflict as a doorway to growth. My role is to help people walk through it within openness, clarity, and support so they emerge stronger, not more divided. Agile tools and techniques. This topic helps interviewers understand whether you use agile tools to enable collaboration and transparency, rather than just for reporting or compliance. They also want to assess whether you can coach teams and leaders to select and adapt tools based on context and need, not trend or convenience. Common questions include: what agile tools do you recommend or have experience with? How do you balance tooling with agile principles? What do you do when tools start driving behavior instead of supporting it? Begin by grounding your approach in principle. Tools should support conversation, not replace it. I focus on using tools that improve visibility, alignment, and feedback without becoming the center of the process. List the kinds of tools you commonly work with, such as backlog and workflow tools, Jira, Azure DevOps, Trello, Rally, visualization and facilitation tools, Miro, Mural, Jamboard, Lucid Spark, communication tools, Slack, MS Teams, Zoom, measurement tools, Jira Dashboard, Flow Analytics, OKR tracking system, Agile health checks and surveys, Team Radar, Agile fluency diagnostic, custom feedback forms. Describe how you coach teams to use tools in lightweight, value-focused ways. For instance, in Jira, you might simplify workflows, avoid unnecessary custom fields, or encourage using comments and tags over status meetings. Explain how you use visual tools like Miro to facilitate collaborative planning, retrospectives, or system mapping, especially in distributed teams, while keeping focus on interaction over perfection. You might share, in one organization, the Jira setup was so rigid that teams couldn't reflect their real workflow. I worked with them to redesign their board to match how they actually delivered, which made daily stand-ups faster and retros more meaningful. Also, talk about your role in coaching leadership to interpret tool data wisely. For example, velocity trends might indicate stability, but without context, it can be misleading. You emphasize storytelling alongside data, using charts as conversation starters, not judgment tools. Touch on potential pitfalls. Teams over replaying on tools and underusing direct communication. Tools becoming bureaucratic gatekeepers. Poorly configured dashboard leading on mistrust. Agile by the tool thinking, where process becomes fixed based because the tool is rigid. Make it clear that your coaching helps people stay focused on outcomes, not inputs. Tools are enablers, not goals. You help teams and organizations choose, evolve, and simplify tool usage to match their maturity and culture. You might close with, I help people see tools as allies, not burdens. When used well, they amplify alignment, clarity, and improvement. But when they get in the way, I help simplify or adapt, always bringing the focus back to people and purpose. We have now explored some of the most important topics that often come up in agile coaching interviews, from leadership coaching to conflict resolution, metrics to psychological safety. Each of these areas reflects the deep and complexity of the role and how much impact an agile coach can truly make across an organization. As you've seen, there are no easy, one size fits all answers. What matters is your ability to think critically, adapt your approach, and stay grounded in agile values while navigating real world challenges. If you found this helpful and want to go deeper, we've created a complete course titled Agile Coaching Interviews, Situational Questions and Answers. It includes a wide range of advanced interview questions and detailed responses, along with expert insight to help you build your own logic and confidence. The course is available at a discounted rate, and you'll find the enrollment link in the resource file attached to this video and also in the video description below. Thanks for being with us, and best of luck in your agile coaching journey. We hope to support you further inside the full course.